03:17 a.m. The first time I heard the buzz, I didn't even open my eyes. My phone vibrated the way it always did when the battery was low, 2 short shivers, a pause, then one longer one, like it was trying not to wake me up. I reached across the bed anyway, half asleep, because in spring of 2020 you didn't ignore a phone that lit up in the dark. You didn't ignore anything. Not an email, not a cough, not a text from someone you promised you'd keep things civil with for the sake of a child you loved more than your own pride. The screen glowed. A notification banner slid down. Unknown number, here. Just that, no punctuation, no emoji. 4 letters that landed in my chest like a weight. Here. I stared until the glow hurt. Then I remembered I was alone. I remembered the apartment was too quiet because the freeway traffic had thinned down to a distant hush. I remembered that the last time my phone vibrated at 03:17 a.m., it was because the hospital's automated line called to tell me they wouldn't let me in with my mother, and I had listened to that message 3 times just to punish myself for not knowing what to do. I remember thinking, don't be dramatic, Genzy, it's probably a scam. But my thumb still hit reply. Who is this? No response. The typing bubbles didn't appear because it was iMessage. Just silence, and then the screen dimmed, and I had that stupid, human thought that only happens when you're sleep-starved and scared. What if someone is actually outside? I got up, bare feet on cold laminate. The air in my apartment smelled faintly like the bleach wipes I couldn't stop using, the ones that tore my cuticles until they bled. I went to the living room window and pulled the blinds just enough to look down. The streetlight outside made everything look like an old security video, washed out, grainy. An empty curb, a parked sedan, no one on the sidewalk. I told myself to go back to bed. Then my phone buzzed again. 03:17 a.m. Too short a pause, one long. Unknown number, not alone. My heart did that thing where it tries to climb out through your throat. The logical part of my brain said, block it, turn the phone off, call someone. The rest of me, anxious, needy, humiliating attachment to anything that promised certainty, said, if you don't answer, whatever this is will find another way to reach you. I wrote, what do you want? And then I saw it, right there in the dim reflection on the glass. My own face, pale, wide-eyed, looking like someone who had already lost something and was pretending she hadn't. Because by the time morning came, I would. By the time I drove across Sacramento for a custody pickup that was supposed to be simple, mask on, 6 feet apart, handoff in the parking lot, I would stand at my ex's apartment door and realize the one thing we were never supposed to use as leverage was gone. And the part that still makes my stomach twist when I tell this, when I think it, when I replay it like a cursed voicemail, is that the first official record of my child not being there wasn't my knock on the door. It was a doorbell camera clip that stamped my presence at 03:17 a.m. Hours before I ever drove over there, when I know, with a kind of sick certainty, that I was in my own bed, alone, answering texts from an unknown number that told me I was. If you're already forming a theory, hold it, because the next detail punishes assumptions. 09:02 a.m. The morning of the pickup, Sacramento looked like a city pretending not to be afraid. The trees were green in a way that felt unfair. The sky was that bright, sharp California blue that makes you think everything is fine even when the news is telling you people are dying alone. I wore a cloth mask I'd sewn myself from an old t-shirt because I couldn't find any in stores. The elastic was too tight behind my ears, and it made me feel like I was constantly being pulled back from something. My hands smelled like sanitizer. I checked my bank app while my coffee brewed because that's what anxiety does, it turns money into a heartbeat. My screen showed the same thing it had shown for days, a balance that looked like a countdown. Rent due, car payment due, A notification from my unemployment account that still said pending, like a cruel joke. I'd lost my job 2 weeks before. Temporary layoff, they called it, like words could soften what it did to you. I had health insurance through my old employer, but they'd sent a letter about Cobra that might as well have been written in another language. The kind of letter that tells you survival is available, but only if you can afford it. My ex-Caleb didn't lose his job. He worked in IT, remote, stable. He had the kind of confidence that comes from knowing the floor won't collapse under you. We'd been together for 4 years. We'd broken up a year before. In normal life, that timeline would sound clean, but co-parenting doesn't allow clean endings. It's like trying to cut a rope that's tied around both of you. You can slice it, but the fibers stay caught under your skin. Caleb and I had a schedule, alternating weeks, handoffs on Saturdays. We agreed to keep it consistent. We agreed to be a united front. We agreed not to weaponize the kid. When you make those agreements, you think the hard part is over. It's not. The hard part is everything you don't say out loud when you're trying to be mature. The resentment, the fear of being replaced, the shame of still wanting someone who makes you feel small, the panic that your child will grow up and choose the other parent because they have more money, more stability, a better-looking kitchen. The night before, Caleb had texted, "Pick up at 10, please be on time, also mask." I'd replied, "Of course." Then at 03:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number telling me, "Here, not alone." I didn't tell Caleb about that. I didn't tell anyone, because it sounded insane. Because in spring 2020, everything sounded insane and no one had the bandwidth for your weird little fear. I drove across town in my old Corolla, windows up, radio off. I kept glancing at my phone on the passenger seat like it might light up again. The streets were quieter than they should have been for a Saturday. Businesses had handwritten signs in the windows, closed until further notice. Some had hearts drawn in marker like love could keep the doors open. Caleb lived in a mid-rise building near Midtown, newish, secure entry, elevator lobby, the kind of place with a no loitering sign that pretends it's for safety and not for keeping certain people out. We'd done handoffs in the parking lot before the pandemic, but now he'd insisted on contactless. He'd texted me a policy screenshot from the building management about limiting visitors in common areas. He always loved policies. He loved having something official to hide behind. The plan was simple. I'd wait outside the front entrance. He'd bring our child down, 6 feet apart. No arguments. I parked. I checked the time. 09:58 a.m. My palms were sweating inside my sleeves. I swallowed, tasted coffee and acid. At 10:01 a.m. I texted, "Here." No response. I waited. A couple walked a dog past me. The dog's nails clicked on the sidewalk like tiny taps. Somewhere inside the building, I heard the elevator chime. A clean, cheerful ding that made my spine tense for no reason at all. At 10:07 a.m. I called Caleb. It rang voicemail. His voicemail greeting was still the same one from when we were together. "Hey, it's Caleb. Leave a message." I didn't. I told myself, maybe he's putting shoes on. Maybe he's wiping down the doorknob. Maybe the kid is melting down because transitions are hard and we're both pretending they are. At 10:12 a.m., I walked closer to the entrance and pressed the intercom for his unit. No answer. At 10:15 a.m., I did something I hated myself for. I walked around to the side gate where I knew the latch didn't always catch. Because I'd been here enough times to know the building's weak spots. Because intimacy teaches you roots. The gate opened with a soft click. Inside, the courtyard smelled like damp concrete and the kind of landscaping mulch that looks pretty and never feels real. I stood there, feeling like I was trespassing in a life I used to have. I found the door to the lobby. It was locked. There was a doorbell camera mounted near the entrance, one of those little black rectangles with a glowing ring. It stared at me like an eye. I knocked harder than I meant to. No one came. And that was the first moment the fear stopped being abstract. Because there are a lot of reasons an X doesn't answer. There are a lot of reasons a handoff is late. But when you're a parent, your mind has a trapdoor labeled child not safe, and once it opens, everything falls through it. I backed up and called again, straight to voicemail. I texted Caleb answer. Nothing. The elevator chimed inside, ding. Then nothing. If you've ever replayed a conversation in your head until the words lose meaning, you know what it feels like when your brain starts writing scripts to survive. I started thinking, maybe he's sick. Maybe he's in the bathroom. Maybe the kid is asleep. Maybe his phone died. Then a darker thought, maybe he's doing this on purpose. Because the last time we'd argued, really argued, was about money, child support. His suggestion that maybe we should revisit the arrangement because I was unemployed and things are unstable. Unstable, like I was a faulty piece in a system. He'd offered to keep the kid more for now. He said it like he was helping me. I'd heard it like a threat. I stepped back out to the front and looked up at the building's windows. I didn't know which one was his. They all reflected the same bright sky. I called the non-emergency line because I didn't want to be dramatic. Because women like me are trained to swallow fear until it becomes shame. The dispatcher's voice was flat, tired. Everyone sounded tired in 2020. Transcript dispatcher, Sacramento Police non-emergency, what's the address? I gave it, my voice shook on the numbers. Transcript dispatcher, and what is the nature of your call? I paused, like if I said it out loud it would become real. My custody pickup, he's not answering, my child is supposed to be here. Transcript dispatcher, how old is the child? I almost said the name. I couldn't, it felt like exposing skin. 5. Transcript dispatcher, any reason to believe the child is in immediate danger? I looked at the locked door, the blank windows, the camera watching me. I don't know, I said, and the truth of that hit me like a slap. I don't know. She told me an officer would come for a welfare check. And then I did what I should have done hours earlier. I checked my phone logs. Because the unknown number from 03:17 a.m. was still there. Here, not alone. My hands were shaking so hard I mistyped. I wrote, is my kid with you? The message showed as sent. No response. I typed, tell me where he is. Nothing. I went into my settings and searched for the location sharing app we used to use. It was still installed. My hands shook as I opened it. The map loaded. A little dot labeled with Caleb's name sat in one spot. Not his building. Not my apartment. A motel off the freeway near West Sacramento. The kind of place with weekly rates and a glowing vacancy sign that always looks tired. My stomach flipped. Because it wasn't just the motel. It was the timestamp under his location. Last updated, 03:17 a.m. My breath caught. My heart started pounding so hard it made my vision blur. I felt like I was about to throw up. There it was, Mystery B opening 2, the evidence contradiction. How could his location be last updated at 3:17 a.m. if my bank alert showed a purchase at 3:18 a.m. near his building? How could the unknown number text me at 3:17 a.m. saying here, not alone, and then his location last updated at 3:17 a.m. at a motel across town? And then Mystery C, the one that would stay open even when everything else closed. Why did 3:17 keep showing up like a fingerprint? I got in my car without thinking. I drove like my fear was a GPS. On the way, my phone rang. Caleb. I answered so fast it felt like I'd been waiting my whole life. Where is he? I didn't say hello. My voice was raw. There was a pause. Then Caleb's voice, calm, controlled. Genzy, you need to stop. You're making this bigger than it is. I felt something snap in me. The calm made me furious. Where is our child? He's fine, Caleb said, and the words were the thinnest kind of comfort. He's with me. Then why weren't you at the pickup? Because I changed the plan, he said, like it was normal. I texted you. You didn't, I said. I have all your texts, you didn't. Another pause. I heard something in the background, muffled like a TV. Look, Caleb said, there's something we need to talk about, not on the phone. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where are you? He exhaled like I was exhausting him. I'm handling something. I'll call you back. Call me back, my voice rose. You can't just. He cut me off sharper now. If you show up somewhere, Genzy, and cause a scene, it's going to go on record. On record. There it was again, his love of documentation, his ability to turn my emotions into evidence against me. And then, quietly, he said something that felt like the real threat. You're unemployed. Think about what you're doing. He hung up. I stared at my phone for half a second, then threw it onto the passenger seat like it had burned me. Which is worse, being lied to or being used? 03:29 p.m. The motel parking lot was half empty. The air smelled like hot asphalt and stale cigarettes even though no one was smoking. There were signs on the office window about COVID cleaning procedures, written in cheerful fonts that didn't match the place. I parked and sat there for a moment, breathing fast, trying to decide whether to go in. Because going in meant making it real. Going in meant becoming the kind of person who shows up at a motel looking for their child. I pulled my mask tighter and walked to the office. The clerk was behind a plexiglass barrier. His eyes flicked up, bored, then cautious when he saw my face. I'm looking for someone, I said. Caleb. The clerk didn't react. He shouldn't have. Motel clerks don't confirm guests. Policies exist for a reason. Caleb would love that. I can't give out information, the clerk said automatically. I'm not asking for a room number, I lied. I'm asking if you can tell him I'm here. It's about our child. The word child changed his expression, not sympathy, wariness, liability. He hesitated, then said, What's the last name? I gave it, he typed. His eyes narrowed. I don't have that name checked in, he said. My stomach dropped. What? I leaned closer. That's where his location. I stopped myself. I heard how insane it sounded. The clerk shook his head. No one by that name. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed. Can you check another name? I asked, because desperation makes you break your own rules. Maybe under a different. He cut me off. Ma'am, if you're worried about a child, call the police. I was. I felt like I was inside a loop. I walked back to my car like my bones were made of glass. I opened the location app again. The dot still sat on the motel. Last updated, 03:17 a.m. I refreshed, nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Caleb, don't go anywhere. We'll meet at my place at 6. We'll meet, like this was a business appointment. I typed bring him now. No answer. I sat there in the motel parking lot and realized something that made my blood run cold. If Caleb wasn't checked in under his name, then why did his location show he was here? The obvious answer, he was using someone else's name. But that meant someone else was involved. And we were supposed to have only 2 people in this story, me and him. That's what co-parenting is supposed to be, 2 adults managing. But reality always adds shadows. I drove back toward Midtown because I couldn't do nothing. I drove with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. The whole way, the elevator chime from the voicemail kept replaying in my mind. Ding, ding, ding. At a red light, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, 6 is too late. I almost ran the light. 05:58 p.m. Caleb's building looked the same in the evening, clean, quiet, indifferent. The sky was turning orange and the courtyard lights flickered on like an automatic promise. I stood outside the entrance, mask on, hands shaking. I'd brought the custody order printed out like paper could protect me. I'd brought a small stuffed animal the kid had left at my place last week because I couldn't bear the idea of him missing it. The front door opened and Caleb stepped out. He wore a mask too, but it didn't hide the fact that his face looked composed, not panicked, not frantic, not like a father whose child was missing. Behind him, no small figure, no tiny shoes. Just Caleb holding a folder. "Where is he?" I said, and my voice cracked. Caleb held up a hand like he was calming a dog. "Genzy, please." "Where is he?" Caleb glanced around like he was worried about neighbors watching. Then he said quietly, "He's with a sitter." "A sitter?" The word tasted wrong. "You have a sitter during my time." "He was tired," Caleb said. "He needed stability." Stability, another word he used like a weapon. My chest tightened, my throat burned. "You didn't have the right," I said. "You didn't have the right to not show up, to disappear." Caleb's eyes hardened. "I didn't disappear," he said. "You did." "What?" I blinked. "What?" He pulled something out of the folder, a printed screenshot. A doorbell camera still frame. It showed a person standing at his lobby door. A woman. Me. Same hair, same posture, same worn jacket. The timestamp on the image read, 03:17 a.m. My blood turned to ice. "I wasn't here," I said automatically. "I was asleep in my apartment." Caleb's voice stayed calm, but I heard the edge now, like he'd been waiting to play this. "You showed up at 3 in the morning," he said. "You pounded on the door, you woke the kid up. He had a panic attack." "That's not true." Caleb lifted his phone and played a clip. The video showed the same figure, me, standing at the door, knocking hard, looking into the camera like I knew it was there. But the audio was distorted, windy, and through it faintly I heard something that made my throat tighten. Ding! An elevator chime. Then my own voice, my voice muffled, saying, "Be on time." I staggered back like I'd been hit. That's not me," I whispered, and I knew how it sounded. I knew how it looked. I knew what Caleb was doing with it. Caleb leaned closer, his eyes cold above his mask. "Are you sure?" he said, "because the camera is pretty clear." My mind scrambled. My body started shaking in a way I couldn't control. My palms went numb. I said. "I didn't come here." Caleb's voice lowered, almost gentle, the way it used to be when he wanted me to doubt myself. "Genzy, I'm not trying to hurt you," he said. "But if you're spiraling, I have to think about what's best for him." There it was, the leverage point, the core fear. He wasn't just telling me I wasn't there. He was telling me my reality was unreliable, that my mind was evidence against me. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe. "Show me the full clip," I said. "Not a screenshot, not a snippet." Caleb's eyes flicked, just for a second, like he hadn't expected that. "It's all there," he said. "Show me the full clip," I repeated. Caleb hesitated, then turned his phone, scrolling. He played it again, longer this time. I watched every frame like my life depended on it. The figure me walked into frame from the left. The camera angle was slightly warped, fisheye. The figure stopped at the door, knocked. Then the figure looked directly at the lens. And smiled. I didn't smile, not like that, not ever. It wasn't my face smiling. It was my face doing something that didn't belong to me. My stomach lurched. Then the figure leaned in and said, clearly, my voice, "Be on time." The clip ended. I stared at Caleb. "That's fake," I said, but I didn't even know what I meant. Deep fake, edited, a glitch, a reflection, a neighbor who looked like me. Caleb's eyes didn't change. "You want to accuse me," he said quietly. "Go ahead, tell the officer, tell the court." Then he did something that felt like a major turn, even though it was just a piece of paper. He held out the folder. Inside was a proposed custody modification, a temporary emergency order request. His signature was already on it. "I'm not doing this to punish you," he said. "I'm doing this to protect him." My throat tightened, tears burned. "This is why," I whispered. "This is why you did it, you withheld him, you staged." Caleb's voice sharpened, cutting through mine. "I didn't withhold him," he said. "You didn't show up." My knees went weak. I grabbed the railing near the entrance, grounding myself in cold metal. In my head, everything rearranged. Major turn 1, the betrayal reframed. It wasn't just about being late. It wasn't just about control. It was about building a record that made me look unstable enough to lose. And the child, my child, was the lever. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Caleb's phone and throw it into the street. I wanted to beg. I wanted to hit him. I did none of those things. Because fear makes you choose the option that keeps you alive in the long term. I said, "Where is he?" Caleb stared at me. Then he said, "You can see him tomorrow, supervised if you sign." My vision blurred. "If you're still here," I said, my voice shaking, "you already feel what this is turning into." 07:41 p.m. I drove to the hospital after that, not because I was injured, but because my body felt like it was failing. I couldn't stop shaking. My heart wouldn't slow down. I thought I might pass out behind the wheel. In the emergency room, everything smelled like antiseptic and fear. Signs about COVID were everywhere. Chairs spaced apart. Faces half hidden behind masks. A nurse took my temperature, asked if I had symptoms. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to say, my symptoms are betrayal. My symptoms are panic. My symptoms are not knowing where my child is. They put me in a curtained area. A doctor asked if I was having chest pain. I said yes, because my chest felt like it was being squeezed by a hand. They did an EKG. They told me it was anxiety. Case note, medical intake note. Patient reports acute panic episode, stressor, custody conflict. Denies SIHI, tearful, hyperventilating, given hydroxyzine, advised follow-up with therapist. Denied SIHI. Those letters looked so cold on the discharge summary, like my fear had been reduced to checkboxes. I drove home with the medication in my pocket, not taking it because I was terrified of being sedated when I needed to stay sharp. At home, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and opened my laptop. If Caleb wanted records, I would make them too. I pulled my phone logs. I pulled screenshots. I wrote down the timeline in a document titled Spring 2020. I wrote, 03:17 a.m., unknown number texts here and not alone. 03:18 a.m. bank alert, $72.18 a.m. p.m. 16th cent. 12:11 p.m. officer welfare check at building. 03:29 p.m. motel clerk says no Caleb checked in. 05:58 p.m. Caleb shows doorbell cam still, me at 03:17 a.m. Then I stared at that last line until my eyes burned. Because I knew where I was at 3:17 a.m. I was in my apartment, alone, answering texts from an unknown number. Unless the texts were a distraction. Unless someone wanted me looking at my phone, not out the window. Unless someone wanted Caleb's camera to record a version of me that wasn't me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, you're writing it down. I froze. How could they know? Unless they were watching. Unless my phone was compromised. Unless Caleb. I typed with numb fingers, "Who are you?" The response came immediately. Unknown number, someone who remembers. The words hit me in a place that felt older than this story, like a threat from the past. Then another message. Unknown number, check the timestamp. My breath caught. Check the timestamp. Mystery B again, evidence contradiction. I opened the doorbell clip Caleb had shown me. I didn't have it, only his phone did. But I remembered something. Those cameras, they sometimes used cloud servers. They sometimes had time drift. They sometimes stamped wrong if the Wi-Fi reset. I searched online for the camera model. Caleb had always talked about his smart home. I found a support page about time zone settings, about daylight savings. Spring 2020. Daylight saving had started on March 8. Some systems glitched. Some recorded an hour off. If the timestamp was wrong, the whole narrative shifted. But the unknown number didn't say check the time zone. It said check the timestamp. Like it was more specific. I remembered the bank alert, 03:18 a.m. at a.m. p.m. If Caleb's camera was off by 1 minute, or if the bank alert was delayed, or if the motel location update was stale. My mind was spinning, building theories like scaffolding. Hold your theory, because the next detail punishes assumptions. 11:09 p.m. I opened my email and searched Caleb's building name because I remembered he'd forwarded me policies before. There it was, an email chain from the landlord, unnamed role, professional tone, about visitor restrictions due to COVID. Attached was a PDF with a line about security footage retention. Lobby CCTV retained for 7 days unless flagged. 7 days. A limit, a countdown. I did something humiliating. I emailed the building management from my own account. Subject, urgent, child welfare/security footage request. I kept it clinical. I cited the officer welfare check. I asked them to preserve lobby footage for 03:00 a.m. 04:00 a.m. on the date in question. Then I waited. My phone buzzed at 03:17 a.m. the next night. 2 short pause, 1 long. Unknown number, ding. My stomach turned. I didn't answer, I didn't move. Then another buzz. Unknown number, he hears it too. He, the child, the lever, the heart. A sob rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down like poison. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the doorbell clip in my mind until the smile felt like it was carved into me. At 04:02 a.m., I finally took the medication. My body sank into heavy fog. The last thing I remember before sleep was the thought, if Caleb is willing to fake me at 3:17, what else is he willing to fake? 09:38 a.m. The next day, Caleb texted an address. A family services office downtown. Supervised visitation, he said, temporary, for comfort. I drove there with my hands shaking again, but this time the shaking was anger too. The office smelled like stale coffee and paper, chairs spaced apart, a plexiglass barrier, a woman behind it with tired eyes and a neutral voice. She asked for ID, she asked for the custody order, she asked for my mask, procedures stacked like bricks between me and my own child. Caleb arrived 5 minutes later. He looked calm. He always looked calm when he was winning. He didn't look at me, he spoke to the worker. I just want it documented, he said. Documented, of course. They led me into a small room with toys wiped down to a shine, a camera in the corner. Then they brought in my child. I won't name him here. It feels like protecting the only thing that still belongs to me. He ran to me, arms tight around my waist, face pressed into my shirt. He smelled like shampoo and the outside air, alive, warm, real. And then he whispered something into my shirt, that made my blood go cold. "Mommy, the ding." I pulled back slightly. "What?" He looked up at me with eyes too serious for five. "The ding," he whispered again, "in the night." My throat tightened. "What ding, baby?" He glanced toward the door like he was afraid Caleb could hear through it. "The elevator," he said. "It goes ding, and then he says beyond time." My vision blurred. Because it wasn't just my voicemail, it wasn't just a clip. My child had heard it too. Evidence hit my body. My hands went numb. My stomach clenched. My brain started screaming that this wasn't just manipulation, it was conditioning. Caleb was using a sound, a phrase, a time. He was training fear. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my face calm because children absorb your panic like oxygen. "Who says beyond time?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then said, "Daddy." My heart cracked, rage surged. I wanted to burst out of the room and scream at Caleb until the whole building echoed. I wanted to tell the worker everything. I wanted to show them the unknown texts. But then I looked at my child's face. He was already tense, already learning that adults' fights live inside his chest too. So I did the only thing I could. I held him, I rocked slightly. I whispered, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe." And in my mind, I said something else. "I'm going to catch you, Caleb. I'm going to catch the part of you that thinks you can do this and call it love." 01:04 p.m. After the visit, I asked the worker, unnamed role, tired eyes, if the office had heard anything about elevator sounds. She blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. "No," she said carefully. "Is there a concern about the child's environment?" I almost told her everything, but I could already see how it would go. Anxiety diagnosis, unstable mother, supervised forever. So I said, "No, just he mentioned something." She nodded, writing a note. A tiny, neutral note that could be interpreted however someone wanted. I drove home and called a therapist because the hospital discharge note told me to. Because if Caleb wanted to paint me as unstable, I needed professional documentation of my stability. The therapist, unnamed role, calm voice, met with me over video. She asked about the breakup, about custody, about sleep. I told her the facts. I told her about 3:17. I told her about the texts. I told her about the doorbell cam. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said carefully, "There are practical explanations for some of this, but the emotional reality is that you feel unsafe, and that matters." Case note, therapy note, my summary after session. Focus, grounding, documentation, avoid reactive contact. Suggested, communicate only in writing, request official footage preservation, consider legal counsel. Noted recurring trigger, 3:17 plus elevator chime. Seeing it written, recurring trigger, made me feel both validated and humiliated, like my fear had a label. I spent the afternoon gathering evidence like a person, building a case against their own life. Text messages with Caleb, screenshots of his thread about on record, the bank alert, the unknown number texts. Then I noticed something I'd missed because my brain had been on fire. The unknown number messages, they weren't random. They came at 03:17 a.m. the first night, then 03:17 p.m. the next day, almost like a mirror, then again at 03:17 a.m. the next night. A pattern, a signature. And the content was always a step ahead of me. "Here, not alone, you don't know him, 6 is too late, you're writing it down, ding, he hears it too." It felt like someone reading my thoughts, or like someone orchestrating my movements. I opened my phone settings and checked linked devices, apps with permissions, anything suspicious. Then I saw it. A location sharing permission for an old family account, Caleb's email still listed as an admin. He could see my location when I used the app. He could see when I drove to the motel. He could see when I went home. He could see when I went to the family services office. He could be the unknown number. Or someone with access to his account could. I changed my password, I removed shared access, I turned off location. My hands shook with a new kind of fear. Because if he'd been watching me, it meant I wasn't just reacting, I was being guided. And if I was being guided, then the 3:17 doorbell clip could be part of something bigger than a custody modification. It could be a setup. 06:22 p.m. The building management replied to my email. They were polite. They were cautious. They said they could not release footage without a formal request from law enforcement. They said footage retention was limited. They said to contact the officer. Limited 7 days, a countdown. I called the officer again, left a voicemail, no response. I called again. Finally, the next morning he called back. He sounded tired. He said, "We can request footage, but we need probable cause of a crime." I said, "Is withholding custody a crime?" He said, "It's a civil matter unless there's an immediate safety threat." I said, "My child is being manipulated. He's being told things in the night. There are unknown numbers contacting me at 3:17. He paused, then said something that made me feel like the floor shifted. "About that time," he said, "your ex mentioned you came to his door at 3 in the morning." My mouth went dry. "He told you," I whispered. "He showed us the clip," the officer said. "He's concerned." Concerned, Caleb's favorite word when he wanted control. I felt rage and panic twist together. "That clip isn't real," I said, "or the timestamp is wrong, or—" "Ma'am," the officer said gently, "I'm not saying it's impossible, but you need to understand how it looks." How it looks, that's the currency of custody. After I hung up, I sat on my kitchen floor again, staring at the stuffed animal on my table like it could tell me what to do. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, he already did. I stared at the message, frozen. It meant the unknown number wasn't just watching, it was confirming the sequence. It knew Caleb had shown the officer. It knew the officer had called me. It knew. I typed Caleb. No response. I typed, "If this is you, stop." No response. Then finally a message. Unknown number, not Caleb. My hands went cold. Because if it was Caleb, then it was someone else using my fear like a puppet string. Someone else who had access to Caleb's systems, his camera, his location. Someone else who was close enough to know his phrases, his habits, his AM/PM. And then I remembered the motel clerk saying no one was checked in under Caleb's name. Someone else had been involved. But in this story there weren't supposed to be extra named characters, just roles, shadows. And shadows can still ruin you. 08:51 p.m. That night, I drove past Caleb's building without stopping. I did it like an addict seeking a hit of certainty. I parked across the street and watched the entrance from my car. People came and went, masked, carrying groceries like normal life was still possible. At 09:12 p.m., I saw Caleb exit with a backpack. He looked around, then walked to his car. He drove away. I followed. I know what you're thinking. Don't, it's stupid. It's dangerous. It's the kind of thing that makes you look unstable. You're right. But if you've ever been made to doubt your own reality, you start chasing proof like oxygen. He drove toward the freeway, toward the same motel. My heart pounded, my hands sweated. I kept a distance, telling myself I was just confirming. He turned into the motel lot. I parked down the street, half hidden behind a dumpster enclosure. I watched him walk to a room on the second floor. I watched him unlock it with a keycard. Hotel keycard, another evidence source. But I didn't have the log. I only had my eyes. Then, for a second, The curtains shifted in the window. A silhouette moved. Not a small child silhouette. Adult height. Caleb stepped inside. The door closed. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, you're close. My blood ran cold. They were watching me. I looked around the street, heart racing. No one, just darkness, the hum of freeway. I drove away fast, like distance could undo being seen. When I got home, I ripped the battery out of my smoke detector because paranoia made me think anything could be listening. Then I sat on my bed and stared at my phone until my eyes went blurry. At 03:17 a.m. it buzzed. 2 short pause, 1 long. Unknown number, next is worse. And then, for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt something darker. A kind of certainty. Because whoever this was, Caleb or not, wasn't trying to scare me into silence. They were trying to guide me into a mistake. And Caleb's whole strategy depended on me making mistakes that could be documented. So I decided something that felt like swallowing glass. I was going to stop reacting. I was going to collect. I was going to let the pattern reveal itself. 09:05 a.m. Over the next week, I lived like a person in a case file. I communicated with Caleb only by text. I kept my words neutral. I asked direct questions. I screenshot everything. Case note, text message snippet. Genzy, confirm pickup Saturday 10. Caleb will discuss. Genzy, please confirm. Caleb, don't harass me. Harass, another word he loved. I requested a formal exchange through a police station parking lot because it was public, camera covered. He refused, citing COVID exposure. He offered the family services office again. I contacted a legal aid hotline because I couldn't afford a private attorney. I sat on hold for an hour listening to recorded messages about overwhelmed resources. In between calls, I watched my child on video visits, because in spring 2020, even intimacy became pixelated. He looked okay, but he flinched sometimes at sudden sounds. Once, when a neighbor's elevator dinged in the background of Caleb's apartment, because yes, Caleb's building elevator was loud enough to carry, my child stiffened and looked toward the hallway. It was subtle, but if you're a parent, you see subtle like it's neon. I asked Caleb in writing if the child was sleeping okay. Caleb replied, he's fine, stop projecting. Projecting, another word. Then, on the 6th day, the building management finally responded to the officer's request for footage preservation. They said footage from the lobby camera for the relevant time window was corrupted. Corrupted. Case note, police report excerpt. Building management reports lobby CCTV for 03:0004. 00 hours, date in question unavailable due to system error. Other time windows available. Corrupted footage didn't just frustrate me, it made my skin crawl. Because the one-time window that mattered 3:00 to 4:00 was gone. Not the whole day. Not the whole week. Just that hour. Which meant either the universe had a cruel sense of irony, or someone did. Major Turn 2 was approaching, and I could feel it like pressure in the air. 02:48 p.m. I went back to the motel during daylight not to confront, but to ask questions like a reporter. I wore a different jacket, I wore a hat. It felt ridiculous. It felt like playing detective in my own nightmare. The clerk recognized me anyway. He looked annoyed. I told you, he said, call the police. I'm not asking for names, I said quickly. I'm asking about policies, about keycards, about check-in. He stared, then sighed like I was a problem he wanted to disappear. We keep logs, he said reluctantly, but I can't show you. What about room cameras? I asked. He snorted, this isn't a casino. I swallowed. "Do you remember anyone checking in that night?" I asked. "A man, mask, backpack." The clerk's eyes flicked to the side like he was thinking. "Lots of people," he said. "It was spring. People were, getting out of the house." Getting out of the house. In 2020, that meant desperation. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "There was one guy," he said, "paid cash, didn't want housekeeping." My heart pounded. "Did he have a kid with him?" I asked. The clerk hesitated. "No," he said, "but he asked about the pool." The pool was closed due to COVID, signs everywhere. Why would a man ask about the pool if he didn't have a child? Unless he was rehearsing, unless he was building a story. Unless he wanted the clerk to remember a guy with a kid, even if there wasn't one. I thanked the clerk and walked out into the sun feeling like it couldn't touch me. In my car, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, he paid cash. I stared at the screen until tears blurred it. Because that confirmed it. The unknown number was not just my fear, it was an observer. Or it was someone inside the motel system, someone with access to payment methods. But a motel clerk wouldn't text me, a motel clerk wouldn't care. So who? I opened my bank app and searched transactions again. The AM/PM purchase at 03:18 a.m. was still there. Then I noticed something else. The transaction details showed card present. Card present means the physical card was used. But that card was in my wallet. I pulled my wallet out with shaking hands. The card was there. I held it like it was proof. If the card was present at AM/PM at 03:18 a.m., and my card was in my wallet, then someone had used another copy. Or the transaction wasn't from my card at all. But the last 4 digits matched. My breath caught. The only way it matched was if the number had been copied. Skimming, cloning, fraud. A crime. Which meant this wasn't just custody. This was something else wrapping itself around custody to make it look like custody. Major Turn 2 landed in my mind like a slammed door. The primary suspect flipped. It wasn't just Caleb manipulating me emotionally. Someone had access to financial data, to systems, to identity. Maybe Caleb had set it up. Or maybe someone else was using Caleb as cover. And that meant the doorbell clip at 03:17 a.m. could have been generated the same way, using my face, my voice, my history, like cloned data. The uncanny hints weren't ghosts, they were artifacts, digital fingerprints, time stamps, audio anomalies. In 2020, everything was mediated through screens, even reality. And reality is easier to fake when no one can meet in person. Spring 2020 made perfect conditions. Fewer eyes, fewer visitors, fewer alibis, more fear. 07:03 p.m. I called the bank and reported fraud. They froze the account. They told me they'd investigate. Then I did something I'd avoided because it felt like surrender. I filed a formal police report about the unknown number and the potential identity theft. The officer, different one this time, took notes. He asked if I had enemies. I almost laughed. I said, "I have an ex." He didn't laugh. He asked for screenshots. I provided them. Transcript: Officer, do you believe your ex is behind the messages? I said, "I don't know," and I hated that answer because it was true. He asked about the doorbell clip. I told him the lobby footage was corrupted. He raised his eyebrows slightly, like he'd heard that before. He asked about the child. I told him the child was safe, physically, but that there were concerning statements about being woken up in the night. He wrote it down, neutral, clinical. And then he said something that felt like a crack in the wall. "We can subpoena motel keycard logs," he said. "If there's an actual crime, fraud could qualify." Fraud: the cloned card, the cash payment. A path. I left the station with a case number and a strange feeling, like I'd stepped into a larger machine, one that might grind me up, but might also capture the thing that had been moving in the dark. 11:58 p.m. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone off, my laptop open, my notes spread out like a desperate altar. I wrote down every time the unknown number contacted me. Every time included 317 in some form. Then I looked up something I'd been avoiding, Caleb's doorbell camera system. Many systems store clips in the cloud. Many allow multiple users. Many allow remote access. If someone had access, they could upload a clip. They could change timestamps. They could manipulate audio. If Caleb had given access to someone else, someone helping him with the custody modification, then that person could be the unknown number. But Caleb was it. He didn't need help. Unless he wanted plausible deniability. Unless the third role in this story wasn't a person I'd never met. Unless it was someone I once trusted with our accounts. Back when Caleb and I lived together, we'd used a shared email for bills, a shared cloud drive, a shared password manager. After the breakup, we split most of it, but not all. I logged into the old shared email, the one I hadn't opened in months because it smelled like our past. There were new login alerts. Case note account security alert. New sign-in from Windows device, West Sacramento 03:17 a.m. My breath stopped. West Sacramento, the motel area. 03:17 a.m. I stared at the alert until my eyes went dry. Then my phone off vibrated anyway. Two short pause, one long. It shouldn't have, it was off. I grabbed it with shaking hands and realized it wasn't the phone. It was the table. The vibration came from inside the wall, a low buzz like machinery. Then, ding, an elevator chime. Except I live on the second floor of a building with no elevator. I froze, every hair on my body lifting. In the silence that followed, I heard something else, a faint metallic tap, like someone gently tapping a pipe. 1, 2, then a pause. Then one longer. The exact rhythm of my phone vibration. And in that moment, I understood the signature dread pattern wasn't just digital. It was physical. It was in the building. In the infrastructure. In the place I thought was mine. I stood up slowly and walked to my front door. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I stepped into the hallway, barefoot, heart pounding. The hallway was empty, dim, smelled like old carpet and cleaning chemicals. Then I saw it. A small piece of paper tucked under my neighbor's door across the hall. It must have been slid under mine too, but it had drifted. I picked it up with shaking fingers. No handwriting, just printed words. Be on time. I dropped it like it burned. I rushed back inside and locked the door, then locked it again like repetition could make it stronger. I sat on the floor back against the door and whispered to myself, "This is real, this is real, this is real." Because when you're being manipulated, the first thing you lose is your own confidence in reality. 08:14 a.m. The next morning, I brought the paper to the police station. They took it with gloved hands like it was contaminated. They said they'd put it into evidence. They asked if I had cameras. I didn't. I couldn't afford them. They asked if I had enemies. I said, I have an ex. They asked if the ex had access to my building. I said no, then realized I couldn't be sure. Caleb had picked up the child from my place before. He'd been in my hallway. He knew the layout. Then the officer asked, "Do you have any proof he was there last night?" And I realized how perfectly this was designed. Everything was timed. Everything was plausible. Everything could be explained away as my anxiety. Except the paper. Except the cloned card. except the account login alert. They asked if I wanted a temporary restraining order. My stomach clenched, because restraining orders are also records, and Caleb could use that too. Look how unstable she is, she's escalating. I said, I just want my child safe. The officer nodded like he'd heard that sentence 1,000 times. 04:37 p.m. The subpoena for motel logs took days. Days where I lived like my skin was too thin. Days where every sound in my building made me flinch. Days where every buzz of my phone made my stomach drop. Caleb kept texting about custody modification. He framed it as temporary. He framed it as best for the child. He framed it as until you're stable. I wanted to scream at him, you're creating the instability. But I didn't, because I learned quickly that in a system that loves paperwork, the person who stays calm looks credible. So I stayed calm in writing. And in private, I fell apart. 03:17 a.m. kept coming. Sometimes it was a buzz from the wall. Sometimes it was my phone lighting up with no notification. Sometimes it was a new login alert. Sometimes it was nothing, just the time on my stove clock when I woke up gasping from a dream where I was knocking on Caleb's door, smiling, saying words that weren't mine. Then on the 10th day, the officer called. His voice was different, less bored, more careful. "We got the motel logs," he said. My hands went numb. He read from the report. Case note, hotel keycard log excerpt. Room 214 issued keycard at 02:53 a.m. reissued at 03:16 a.m. Guest name, C, redacted. Payment, cash. Vehicle, dark sedan. Reissued at 03:16 a.m. 1 minute before 03:17 a.m. My throat tightened. "Was it Caleb?" I whispered. The officer paused. "The name on the room is not your ex." My heart pounded. "It's not," my voice cracked. "No," he said, "but the CCTV exterior parking lot shows your ex entering the room at 03:19 a.m. 03:19, after the reissued keycard, after the unknown texts, after the AM/PM transaction." My brain struggled to hold it. "So he was there," I said, "with someone else." "We can't confirm who checked in," the officer said, "but we have footage of your ex, and we have a reissued keycard 1 minute before the time you keep mentioning." I swallowed hard. "Does the footage show a child?" I asked. The officer's silence lasted too long. "No," he said finally, "it does not." My stomach dropped, my vision blurred. Then where had my child been that night? Caleb said the child had a panic attack because I knocked at 03:17 a.m. But the motel footage showed no child, which meant Caleb's story was lying. Mystery reframed again. The relationship lies shifting. It wasn't about my late-night knock causing a panic attack. It was about creating a narrative of my instability while Caleb was somewhere else at 3 a.m. with someone else, building a different story. But if no child was at the motel, where was the child? The officer said, "We need to talk to your ex again." I said, "And the doorbell clip?" He said, "We're requesting the original file from the camera provider." Original file, the cloud, the digital fingerprint. The officer's tone was cautious now, not because he believed me fully, but because the evidence was starting to look less like anxiety and more like orchestration. "If you have a theory, keep it quiet for now." 07:52 p.m. Caleb called that night, not a text, a call that alone felt like a crack. I answered. "Genzy," he said, voice tight, "what did you do?" "What did I do?" I laughed and it sounded like a sob. "What did you do?" He exhaled hard. "The police came, they asked about the motel, they asked about." "The motel," I said and my voice sharpened. "So you were there." Silence. Then Caleb said, quieter, "It was none of your business." None of my business, like my life hadn't been intertwined with his lies. Was our child with you? I asked. He was safe, Caleb snapped. He was with a family member. Family member, unnamed role, convenient shadow. Then why did you tell the officer I came to your door? I said. Why did you show that clip? Caleb's voice went cold. Because you did, he said. I didn't, I said, and you know I didn't. A pause, then he said, You're doing this because you're jealous. Jealous, another label, another way to make my fear sound petty. I felt something settle in me like a stone. This isn't about jealousy, I said quietly. This is about you using our child as leverage, and someone else helping you. Caleb laughed, but it sounded wrong, forced. There is no someone else, he said. I remembered the motel log, guest name not Caleb. I remembered the unknown number, not Caleb. I said, then explain the cash room. Explain the keycard reissue at 3:16. Explain the paper under my door. Caleb went silent. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower, almost afraid. What paper? He said. My skin prickled. You didn't, I started. Then my phone buzzed mid-call. Unknown number, he did. My breath caught, my stomach dropped. Caleb heard me go quiet. Genzy, he said, what's happening? In that moment, the world tilted. Because if Caleb didn't know about the paper under my door, then the physical intrusion wasn't him. Which meant the third presence, the shadow role, was real. And it had access to both of us. I whispered, Caleb, are you getting messages too? Silent, then reluctantly he said, what messages? I didn't answer, because pride is stupid and fear is bigger. Then Caleb said something that made my blood run cold. My phone's been weird, he said, buzzing at night like phantom notifications. My heart pounded. What time? I whispered. He hesitated. Then, like he hated himself for saying it, he said, 3:17. We both went silent. In that silence, faint through the line, I heard something in Caleb's background. Ding! An elevator chime. And then very softly, a child's voice in the distance, my child saying, Daddy. Caleb's breath hitched. Then the call dropped. No goodbye, no hang-up sound, just dead air. I stared at my phone, shaking. Mystery C tightened. Who was behind the pattern, and why did it persist across both of us? 11:40 p.m. The next day, the officer called again. They'd got the original doorbell file from the provider. The timestamp metadata didn't match the overlay timestamp. Case note, digital forensics summary. File metadata indicates creation time 02:11 a.m. Overlay shows 03:17 a.m. Possible manual time adjustment or export artifact. Audio track shows splice at 00:06:00:07. Splice. Edited. Not a glitch, not anxiety, not imagination. Edited. Reading the word splice made my hand start shaking so violently I had to sit down, because it meant someone had taken time to manufacture my face and voice into a piece of evidence. Someone had weaponized intimacy against me. The officer said, We're treating this as potential harassment and identity-related fraud. Harassment, fraud, real words. Then he said, Your ex is also reporting strange activity on his accounts. I closed my eyes. So it's not just me, I whispered. No, the officer said, it appears not. Two mysteries were closing. Mystery A, Caleb's claim that I came at 3:17 collapsed under the splice evidence. Mystery B, the timestamp contradictions, started to make sense as manipulation. But Mystery C, the unresolved end question, opened wider, if it wasn't just Caleb who was orchestrating it. The officer asked if I had any shared contacts, any old roommates, any maintenance workers, anyone who had access to both buildings. I thought of 100 unnamed roles: the neighbor, the clerk, the landlord, the officer, the dispatcher, the nurse. None of them felt right. Then I remembered the old shared email login alert: West Sacramento at 3:17. The motel. The keycard reissue at 3:16. Someone was using physical access points keycards, paper under doors, paired with digital manipulation, spliced audio, timestamp mismatches, cloned cards. It was a hybrid kind of stalking, the kind that thrives when everyone is isolated. Spring 2020 made perfect conditions. Fewer eyes, fewer visitors, fewer alibis, more fear. 02:06 a.m. 2 nights later, I woke up gasping, not because of a buzz, not because of a ding. Because my child's stuffed animal, still on my table, fell onto the floor by itself. I sat up, heart racing, staring into the dark. The air smelled faintly like ozone, like a cheap electronic overheating. Then I heard it. A soft metallic tap from inside the wall. 2 taps, pause, 1 tap. The rhythm again. My phone screen lit up without vibrating. A notification banner slid down. No number, no contact name, just a system-style alert like an app notification. Be on time. My skin went cold. I didn't touch the phone, I didn't move. And then from the hallway outside my apartment door came the elevator chime. Ding! Except there was still no elevator. I froze, every hair on my body lifting. Eventually, the sound stopped. The light on my phone dimmed. And the silence that followed was worse than the noise, because it meant whoever did this could come close, touch the edges of my life, and leave without being seen. 09:17 a.m. The next morning, I did something I'd been resisting because it felt like admitting defeat. I installed a cheap door camera. I borrowed money from my mother to buy it, telling her it was for safety, not telling her the whole truth because I couldn't stand the look she'd give me, the one that says, "You chose this man." I set it up, I tested it. I set the time zone manually. I checked daylight savings. I double-checked. Then I waited. That night at 03:17 a.m., the camera recorded. A figure in the hallway. Not Caleb, too tall, too broad. No face visible because of a hoodie and a mask, normal in 2020, terrifying in this context. The figure stopped at my door. Held up a phone. Played a sound. Ding. Then the figure slid something under my door. And left. I watched the clip 3 times, heart pounding, stomach churning. Then I opened my door carefully and picked up what had been slid under. It was a printed screenshot. A still frame of my own door camera clip, captured and printed somehow within minutes. On it in black ink was a single sentence. "You're always late." My throat tightened, tears burned. Because the cruelty was personal now. It wasn't just control. It was character assassination. It was rewriting my identity as unreliable, late, unstable. I called the police. They came, they took the paper, they watched the clip, they nodded, they said they'd escalate. But when they asked if I recognized the figure, I had to say no. The shadow stayed unnamed. 05:44 p.m. 2 days later, Caleb called me again. His voice sounded stripped down, like fear had finally scraped away his confidence. "They were in my hallway," he said. My stomach dropped. "They," I whispered. "The hoodie," he said. "The ding, the paper." My hands went numb. "What did it say?" I asked. Caleb hesitated, then said quietly, "It said be on time." I closed my eyes. And for the first time since this started, I felt something like clarity. This wasn't just about custody. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't even just about Caleb. It was about a pattern that attached itself to both of us, 2 people tied together by a child. A third presence exploiting that tie. Maybe for money, maybe for control, maybe for something that didn't even make sense in a rational way. The officer later told us they suspected a person who had worked in building maintenance across multiple properties in the area. An unnamed role with access to hallways, cameras, keycards, and enough technical knowledge to manipulate timestamps and audio. They said there had been other reports, other single mothers, other custody disputes, other 317 messages. Anonymous similar mentions, a pattern. But they never gave me a name, not officially, not in writing. Because sometimes the system finds a theory and stops there. And sometimes the thing doing the harm is good at staying just outside the frame. 11:58 p.m. The last time I saw my child that spring, before everything shifted into court dates and supervised visits and paper trails that felt like shackles, he hugged me and whispered, "Mommy, are you on time now?" My heart broke in a way I can't describe without sounding dramatic. Because that's what this did. It didn't just threaten custody. It planted a phrase inside my child's mind that turned time into fear. Caleb and I ended up in mediation. We ended up with a temporary arrangement that gave Caleb more time, because stability wins in court, and stability is easier when you have money. Caleb didn't win completely. The spliced doorbell evidence helped. The fraud report helped. The hallway camera clip helped. 2 mysteries closed. But the third stayed open. Because even after the papers were signed, even after the cameras were installed, even after the officer told me they were looking into a suspect, my phone still buzzed sometimes in the dead of night. Not every night. Just enough to keep the dread alive. And sometimes, when I wake up without knowing why, I look at the clock. 03:17 a.m. And I swear, this is the part that makes me feel like a liar even now. I swear I can hear, faint through the walls of whatever apartment I'm in, the clean, cheerful sound of an elevator chime. Ding! Like someone reminding me that in spring 2020, in Sacramento, time itself became a lever. And the worst part is this. I don't know if the person who started it ever stopped. Or if they just moved on to another custody exchange, another anxious parent, another child who would learn to flinch at a sound. Because that's the only unanswered question that still keeps me awake. Not whether Caleb lied, he did. Not whether the evidence was manipulated, it was. But whether the pattern was ever really about us at all. I'm Genzy, and you were listening to SKM Mysterious. We'll meet again on another night. Until then, don't turn the lights off.